So our next speaker is Rob Woodside. Rob's background is in archaeology, and he was one of the first cohort of students to graduate from the MSc, and he's now working as the Head of Conservation for the National Trust in the London and the South East region.
Thanks very much. Well, hello everyone. It's really nice to be here today. I can't quite believe it's been 10 years since I started the course. It seems to fly by. So it's really nice to be invited back here today and see some of the old faces and some friends and new faces as well. So great. Thanks for putting this on. Great. Like others, I just want to give a little bit of a background about myself, the journey I took, if you like, to the MSc, what I learned on the back of it, and what I've done with it since. And important for me is now I'm locking up, I'm a relatively senior manager, and I'm thinking about the skills I need in my team to take things forward. How can I draw on my experience through this course and other things I've done in my career? I'm thinking about what are the skills, what's the experience, who are the people that I need to help sustain heritage in the future after the National Trust. Okay, so I'm an archaeologist by background. I studied archaeology at school and university, and I learned an awful lot about archaeology, but I don't think I learned an awful lot about being an archaeologist and what it really meant. What does archaeology mean in the modern world? Is it just a purely research academic subject, or has it got relevance and currency in the modern world? And the thing that I think really opened my eyes is going on a fantastic trip that I did after I graduated from university around the Middle East. And having been brought up with far too much Indiana Jones and Lawrence of Arabia, dreams and striding in the desert looking for Roman archaeology, I finally did it. Great. I went to Syria, one of the most wonderful, extraordinary places I've ever been. And as an archaeologist, it is just so alive with the remains of the past. And people live in Chiquanjiao with ancient buildings and just take it in their stride. And you can see the history, you can read the history of the landscape, and you read the history of the culture as well. And I think there's a sort of light bulb moment to think, actually, this is big. This isn't just about getting excited about pottery remains and pretending to be Jones. It was actually really thinking about, gosh, there's something quite exciting here. It's real, it's visceral, it's about politics, it's about people, and it has really meaning to it. And so I had a great experience there. And when I've ever been there in the past, I realised what a wonderful, warm, welcoming country is. My heart just goes out to what's happening so many last years in this country. And just the last couple of weeks, we give a couple of examples of, again, just how alive heritage really is. It's not something in a box, it's something very real. Two examples, ISIS smashing up antiquities from museums, bulldozing archaeological sites in Syria and Iraq. Basically destroying stuff they can't flog in the black market to find illegal deeds. But it just shows how extreme some people can take and react to heritage. On the other hand, this week we've got the reburial of Richard III. And I think it's a wonderful example of just the extraordinary level of, I think, decorum that's gone into that, and a bit of circus as well. I think it's quite a fascinating event to see that this archaeological discovery in its own right. The people lining the streets of Leicester see this picture. So we have a very strong connection of history and identity in this country, which is very, very exciting to see. Okay, so having done my wonderful backpacking trip around the Middle East and having a great experience, I was really, really lucky to get a job with the National Trust. My first job with the Trust was up on Hadrian's Wall. Again, fantastic Roman archaeology, but what I learned there was an enormous amount, not just about the archaeology of the Romans, but about prehistory, about medieval archaeology, about post-medieval archaeology, about the modern world. But importantly, it's context in a living, live landscape. So a landscape that was farmed, it was actively managed for biodiversity, thousands and thousands of visitors on it, and facing all the challenges that you might expect that a busy, pressurised environment have. I'd say it was such a great learning experience to be able to again, stretch the mind, think of new things, and think, okay, this doesn't just exist in isolation, there's a bigger context to all this as well. I think it's a great learning experience, again, thinking from being an archaeologist to conservationist, thinking about how do you look after and care for these places in the modern And in my early years in the National Trust, I'm so lucky, I was very blessed to do some wonderful pieces of work. That's me surveying some rocks in Long Island. It's a pose shot, so it looks like I'm doing something exciting. Put me up that picture. Trust always like to use that. There is some work that I did at Crewe Park, which is a restoration of one of Capability Brown's. It was a second landscape, and we restored it from basically a ploughed up field into back to as how Brown and his contemporaries may have recognised it. I worked in Cornwall on archaeological sites and industrial archaeology, Cornish mining, World Heritage Site, advising the trust on how to look after buildings and look after the landscapes around it. And there's a building there, I said, hey, you should be student. Yeah, I'm a very, very cold winter surveying that building, inside and out, using the most basic technology, basically a pencil, a pen, a ruler, and there was no structure inside that building which was really vacant. So again, it's an awful lot about surveying, and that's my experience. Essentially, not at all different a surveyor. So my time in the trust, I really enjoyed and developed my interest in archaeology and building. But I wanted something else. I wanted to think beyond that. I wanted, having got a strong interest in the social and economic aspects of heritage, I wanted to think, well, how can I build that? How can I find a way that is actually going to build my skills and knowledge and how maybe step forward in the career? Because wonderful is working in National Trust Archaeology is a kind of export, and I wanted to think, well, what else can I do? So, last was it led me to the UCL course. And again, like others, I'm very, very grateful recipient of the Ecclesiastical Insurance Scholarship. Thank you very much, Paul and team. Again, that it just gave me, and many of others have said, the opportunity to spend the time to do this when you're working. And when you're having to sort of stop work, fund these sort of things, no other sources of money, it's a real boon. I was very grateful. So I came to the course. Actually, I read, as soon as I read the month about it, I thought, yeah, that's something I would love to do. I'm so glad I did. And I think it was a really interesting structure. I think the teaching structure, in terms of being thrown into a room for 2 solid weeks, and really just chewed up and mind stretched, you have to test yourself enormously. It's just a true experience. We're working with people all the time, with fellow students, the professionals who are working, the academics working on it. Great thing to actually do. So my first module, I think, like as well, I really enjoyed the social and political context. Yeah, that was great. I loved that. I really got into that. Second module, I dropped straight into the science. Oh my god. So that was a shock, wasn't it? It was really deep diving stuff. So actually, to go from this sort of broad, contextual stuff about UNESCO and World Heritage Sites and conventions into, right, where's our humility? I hope I got through it, Adam. But actually, yeah, it's a horrific, and it's a challenge to kind of strip again what I wanted. I wanted to be stretched. I wanted to feel what it was like to understand this. The third module, Optimalta. What a great experience. What a wonderful country. Most of them are really inspired. And again, that intensive experience during working with the team on the Museum of Fine Arts, trying to understand, challenge to think, what is the best environmental management of this environment? The historic building, the heart of the historic city, the historic collection. How do you manage and sustain that collection in the environmental needs long term? Really challenging, really exciting. And the fourth module was really about how do we pull all that together? How do we actually turn that into real lifestyle? Really the ability to make it so really fantastic experience. Touching on my dissertation, what I tried to do is pull together all my interests at the time. I was very interested in the climate change debate. It was very current because working with May was deeply involved. It was absolutely brilliant because again it made me think about, okay, I'm really interested in how I place, how I get this. And so my dissertation was looking at trying to assess the vulnerability of climate change and cultural World Heritage Sites. It's quite high level stuff. What I was trying to do is understand the best of conservation management and conservation science, and understanding the detail of that, but also trying to learn from other sectors as well, to trying to understand, well, how does the ecological sector deal with the impact of climate change? What are they doing in the natural world? How does the international development world play into this? What can we learn from other disciplines and other players to really find a way of measuring how vulnerable is research? And so this approach was trying to draw in the concept of vulnerability, the degree in which a system is susceptible to or able to cope with adverse effects of climate. Some big words there. And really going through a sort of systematic approach and looking at the nature of a hazard. Is it flooding? Is it storm events? Is it atmospheric events? What is happening that may actually cause a hazard? How exposed are your sites to climate change? You might be in a coastal environment, you might be inland or in the city. All these factors play into how exposed you might be to that hazard. How sensitive is the asset you're looking at? You might be dealing with a large medieval castle, in which case it's pretty solid, probably right. You might be dealing with some structures which are going to be very, very, very sensitive to quite subtle change in climate change. The human influence, what's happening around you? Again, nothing happens in isolation. So everything, and particularly the trust was looking at the time, it's understanding about land use, farming, it was about planning, it was about the fact that whatever sometimes we may be, a lot of the time we're hindering ourselves by actually not managing our landscapes properly and not giving ourselves space to actually allow natural processes to occur. So lots of sort of things like cement, hard surfacing, road surfaces, drainage or lack of drainage, and development of floodplains, all those sort of things are actually coming in. And then adaptive capability. So have you got the skills and ability in your organisations to cope with this? Because if you do all the rest of it and have all other work, but if you haven't got the skills and abilities and then think, okay, this is how we adapt, how we move, how we change that, how we cope. So in other words, management structures, the skills, the ability, capability of the organisation is good as well. And my case study was on Paramount, I used to be a BT by the way, but that was just using the Royal Heritage Site as a testing example to say, okay, how can you test this? How does it work? Things I learned and enjoyed along the way. The people. What an inspirational bunch. I'm not just because I'm here, mate, but I actually do genuinely think to work with such a group dedicated, enthusiastic people who want to help you learn more about this great exciting. It's great to work with students who come from around the world to do this. I've always worked with people in Germany, and Mexico, and Poland, and others from around the world. And just to be able to get challenged, well, my Anglo mindset might be completely different. But it might be the right way forward. So that's really useful. And just the professionals that get brought in to do the course as well. People from the British Museum, the V&A, from Heritage, from government. Just the calibre of people who May was able to attract those to bring into the course was just fantastic. The places, also, not surprisingly, are growing just working in such a great place. But also there were places we went to in and around London. I remember a wonderful trip we had to Spitalfields and Market there, looking at some of the buildings, and just again that exposure you get in this course to different types of environments, different places. I saw how we got in the Museum of Immigration. I also realised I'm not a scientist. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's some great conservation science going on. It's all great stuff, and it's not for me. At the end of the day, but I learned a hell of a lot from it, and I learned to work with people who did know that. That's the work learning I took away from it. That I don't feel I have to do this, but I do know how to talk to people who do know about it, and that's one of the real benefits from this. And the benefits of the multidisciplinary course is that you do get the ability to actually pick people's brains from different professions who may know that science stuff or know. So it's great. So what did I do with it? When I left, I graduated in 2006. And before I did the second module, I left the trust. Again, obviously trying to expose myself to do other things to different parts of heritage. And it was really interesting, challenging, working with a very big company called Atkins, who largely do big infrastructure type stuff. But a little niche business which is focused on heritage. And myself and a small number of people were really trying to build a business around sustainable heritage. That was our aim objective, was looking at the social, economic, environmental and cultural aspects of conservation and heritage management. So we were really looking to push ourselves to think, well, what kind of business can we build on working with different organisations? And there's a stick here, pointer stick. So some great things. So working on a World Heritage Site, again, looking at the multi-aspect conservation of the site landscape. Whole estate management, interpretation strategy for all of Wales. Nobody else has done that. Major infrastructure. Trying to develop a heritage strategy for Qatar, which didn't happen. Fastest and richest growing economy in the world. That's nice to worry about. But anyway, it's good to go ahead to that. And I did spend some comment when I was the cultural heritage strategy for the new South Downs National Park, which was great because that was real life stuff. And this chap, St Piran's Trust down in Cornwall, was actually how do you conserve, expose, display a medieval structure thought to be the oratory of the St Piran, who's the patron saint of Cornwall. How do you actually dig it out of a sand dune and expose it and reveal it? And the technicality, again, this is where the sustainable heritage bit really played in, because I was working with hydrologists, I was doing ecologists, I was working with planners, and others to try and find sustainable solutions to that. Very fun. So now I'm back in fold. I'm back in the National Trust. I've been out there 2.5 years. It's really great to be in the Trust, to lead, get different experiences, come back in again. I'm now head of conservation for London and South East region, which is about a quarter of the National Trust. It's pretty big, actually. And it's everywhere from West Oxfordshire to White, Clifford Davis, Central London. So we've got about 33 property portfolios. And I've got about 1,000 listed buildings. It's quite a big amount. I've got it is exactly 192 grade 1 and grade 2 star listed buildings as well. So the calibre, the standard of buildings we're dealing with is quite extraordinary. And in my role, I manage a team of about 80 conservation professionals working across the region. And we've got building surveyors, we've got rural surveyors who look after land, we've got estates, we've got ecologists, planners, archaeologists, environmental management experts, conservators, curators, so a big, broad, multi-disciplinary team. So again, it's just being able to have that expertise and be able to be able to work with these teams. And again, I really benefit from the course to find ways of learning to work with other disciplines. And we're doing some extraordinary stuff at the moment. I'm really excited to be back in the trust. I do think I've got the best job in the world. But to be able to one day to be talking about the completing restoration of stone landscape gardens on one hand. This is the regeneration rain hall in East London. Again, a place which was tenanted, nobody lived there, very empty, and now turning back to community use. Dealing with coastal erosion, last year's storms took about 6 metres off the cliffs at Birmingham Gap, and that's the Coast Guard cottage, which has been partly removed to allow for that. Major conservation work. This is Noel, this is our patron, HRH, and this is the largest conservation project in the country at the moment. It's about £18 million project over 8 years to completely restore medieval and Tudor palace and all its collections. And as part of that, it's funded by the HLF, is to build a conservation studio. So not only are we looking at the building, but we actually now finally have the infrastructure and the skills to look up at the furniture and the painters and such as well. And these are, again, nature conservation-wide, this is a pair of African bee-eaters, a rare migratory flight to the island of Wight from North Africa. But just not only is it extraordinary we've got these creatures here, but actually managing the swamp, the tidal wave of twitchers who came in to want to look at these things. Again, a great opportunity to think and promote our work in nature conservation in a tangible place. Last bit. Some of you might have heard Helen Ghosh on the radio or read the paper this week. We've launched a new 10-year strategy, which is very exciting. And it's got 1 minute left. I won't go through it because I have copies here. If anyone wants to read, and it's all online, it's good stuff. But basically, we are looking forward. We're looking forward as a confident organisation who wants to do some more extraordinary stuff. So we're trying to respond to 21st century needs, just as our forebearers responded to 19th, 20th century needs as well. So the challenges in terms of urban growth at the end of the 19th century, the development of protection of natural landscapes in the early 20th century, saving the country house in the 40s and 50s, the coastline in the 60s, opening up properties in the 90s and 2000s, thinking hard about what's our role in the future. Our role as an landowning organisation is really going to be focused on not just nature conservation, but landscape conservation on a big scale. So more landscape scale working and really trying to open up our conservation work beyond our boundaries, so we're not just polishing the crown jewels, but actually working with partners in a much more collective way. And it's like all of that, we're still going to invest in about £1 billion in building conservation and other conservation projects in the next 10 years. I think that's the first time we're really able to sit down and think, crikey, how much are we going to spend on this? But actually, yeah, and we've got the funding mechanisms in place and the fundraising in place to try and work that up. It's just a chat, I've just got to do it. But actually, this is what I can come in. This doesn't happen on its own. We need skills in the organisation. We need people who have the clear, technical, professional experience and knowledge to take this things forward, but who understand the social, political, environmental context they're working in, and they can also work as a team in multi-disciplinary environments, and they can deliver, they can get it done. So, in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to do a recruitment campaign. There's a constant need for building professionals, building staff, who've got that expertise and really take things forward. So if anyone's interested in the job, let me know. I'll have a chat afterwards. But actually, no, seriously, actually, there is a recruitment. There is a skills shortage at the moment. There's a hugely competitive market for heritage skills and construction skills. And we can't ignore it. And we have to continue to grow the heritage skills of the future. Because the trust in us is, we need the skills. We need to have people who are going to be able to take these things forward. So that's quite serious. We need you. We need people who do this course, who are qualified for this course, and bring their skills to an organisation like the Trust. So, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan Horry, and I'm a current student on the MSc course. I was just wondering how much your research into climate change and heritage has played a role in your professional career.
In my profession?
Yes.
Well, I've always tried to peddle it. When I was a consultant, it was always the thing I was trying to do. And it's interesting that in terms of the work that I do now, it's become much more up the agenda than it was before, actually. So working for my work in consultancy, we always try to set our work within the context of climate change and future development, future landscapes. But it was always a challenge to really sort of get the buy-in to do it. And I think the reality is that climate change went off the agenda for a long time. I think politically it was trumped by the economy, terrorism, whatever. But actually, what the National Trust is now saying is it's one of the biggest threats to our heritage and our natural environment today. So I'm dusting it all off and getting back into it again. So it's critical.
Okay, at the back there.
Renewable models collection. I just got a question regarding climate change. Is there anywhere a tool or book application on how the weather extremes have impacted on the heritage sector? Is there anything available up to date?
There is some up-to-date material, and actually the National Trust, about 10 years ago, we had a document called Forecast Changeable, and that was looking at the impacts in terms of our property, and we're about to recast that, so there will be something out very soon which we'll put out in the public domain.
And maybe I might follow on from that, just on the subject of climate change. I mean, is it something that you're seeing the impacts of in your daily job?
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, it doesn't come with a big label on it. This is climate change, but I think one of the things we have to look at is about a bit earlier than this time last year. I remember last Christmas time we had some very heavy storms, and we sustained about £4 million worth of damage to our buildings and structures. huge, that was a 3 or 4 storey events. And that was a real indication. Now, you can't necessarily make that with climate change, but actually it's an indication of just how vulnerable the places are to those sort of events and how expensive it is to then to rectify them as well. I mean, it's hugely expensive. I've still got little pockets underneath them now, which we haven't got around to. So I think it's definitely something that we're much more attuned to. We're also seeing it in terms of the nature conservation work, because there is definite, real clear evidence of migratory shift from insects and birds, which you can track through. And some of the things that we're having to do in our properties, with invasive species, tree disease, again, linked back to a changing environment. And actually the operational response to some of those things can be really complicated and really expensive. So as much as anything, it's not just the physical impact of things, it's actually the regulatory and legislative work that actually makes you have to deal with that cost of your money.
And this is where we come back to the interdisciplinary aspect of things, that you can't have a one-directional approach to something like this. Any more questions before we break for coffee? Yeah.
Hi, Henry Oswald. I think, climate change is obviously a huge threat, but another one for the National Trust in particular, I think, is rising visitor numbers. Is there anything in your plan or your day-to-day that you're doing to mitigate against wear and tear and just the ever-increasing car parks I see now? Is that something you have to do with?
It's the day job. Yeah, I mean, the visitor numbers have shot up in the last few years. Funny enough, the Trust did remarkably well in the recession. I think there's a sense of, well, 2 things. One, people weren't going abroad, much more staycation, staying around. People were also, culturally wanting to look for activities they could do. Our membership numbers have risen because it's a good deal, frankly. We're a good deal on this membership. And so our numbers have gone up. So yeah, actually the area of suffering is less about the conservation side at the moment. It's definitely about the infrastructure. It's definitely the capacity of car parks, our loos, dealing with water discharge and all that kind of stuff. That's the area we're struggling at the moment. I think we've got mechanisms in place to think, okay, how do we manage the impact of increasing visitor numbers on buildings? And I was down at Paulson Lacey in Surrey last week, and we're looking at just that. We're opening up more parts of the house and thinking, how can we phase opening over the years so you're not impacting on the impact? Because we're open all year round now, but not necessarily on the same basis of the house is always open, you can go everywhere. So more inventive ways of dealing with it, more inventive ways of actually spreading people out across the estates.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, we'll take a break for coffee and come back in half an hour. Thank you very much again.